She was cleaning the boardroom alone. Then the new guy helped her mop the floor. He was the CEO. "Oh no, I'm so sorry, let me clean that right now," Karen gasped, her cheeks flushing a deep pink as the cold water spread across the floor and soaked into the man's polished leather shoes. The man, tall and sharp in a white button-down shirt with sleeves casually rolled up, glanced down, then looked at her with a smile that disarmed her panic. "It's okay. Here, let me help you." He didn't wait for her to respond. He knelt down beside her, reached for the mop that had toppled over, and began to wipe the puddle with calm, practiced strokes. Karen froze for a moment. In the year and a half she had worked as a night janitor on the 22nd floor of Holloway and Pierce, no one, not an assistant, not even another janitor, had ever offered to help her clean anything. They walked around her, sometimes through her, like she was furniture. But this man, he just smiled, unfazed, like getting his designer shoes soaked at 11 o'clock at night was something that happened every Friday. Karen blinked and scrambled to get the second mop from the cart. "I really am sorry. I didn't see you coming," she said, kneeling beside him. "No harm done," he said, his tone warm without even a hint of irritation. His hands worked efficiently as though he had done this before. His dark hair fell slightly into his eyes as he leaned over the mess. "I should have been more careful. Walking into a mop zone, that's on me." Karen gave a soft laugh, unsure why her heart was pounding so hard. Maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was embarrassment, or maybe it was the way he looked at her, not with annoyance, not with pity, just curiosity. "You new here?" she asked, trying to fill the silence. "Sort of," he replied, not looking up. "Started recently. I work in tech support, mostly back-end systems, data stuff, you know, the unglamorous kind." "Ah, makes sense," she said, offering a polite smile. "Most of the regulars are out by 6. You're the first person I've bumped into on this floor past 10 who isn't yelling into a Bluetooth headset." That made him chuckle. "Yeah, I try to keep my yelling to a minimum." They finished drying the floor, working side by side. The room, with its long glass walls and sleek conference table, glowed under the overhead lights. Outside, the New York skyline shimmered, steel and glass spires piercing the night. The occasional honk or siren floated up from the streets below, but up here it felt like a different world, isolated, quiet, safe. "Thanks for helping," Karen said, as she straightened up, brushing her blonde hair back into the loose ponytail that had fallen against her neck. "Most people would have just stepped over the puddle." "Then most people are missing the point of being human," he said, standing beside her. She studied him for a moment. There was a quiet kindness in his face, something familiar yet impossible to place. "What's your name?" she asked. "Vincent." "I'm Karen." "Nice to meet you, Karen," she nodded. "Likewise." They stood in companionable silence. Then Karen glanced toward the window. Stars blinked faintly above the city glow. "It kind of looks like something out of an Andrew Wyeth painting tonight," she murmured. Vincent turned to look. "Wyeth? Not a name I hear much." Karen smiled. "I always loved the way he made stillness feel alive, like silence with a heartbeat." Vincent nodded. "Yeah, there's something about his work, like searching for something you can't quite name." She looked at him, surprised. "You know his paintings?" He smiled. "Christina's World was the first one that ever hit me. It stuck." Karen's voice dropped. "That one gets me too." They shared a quiet moment, two strangers bound by lines on canvas neither had painted. "I like to sketch sometimes," Karen added. "Nothing serious, just when I can." Vincent's gaze softened. "Well, I hope you never stop. The world needs eyes like yours." A warmth spread through her, unexpected and deep. For once, the silence between them didn't feel empty, it felt full. It had been 4 days since their first meeting, but Karen couldn't shake it. While cleaning counters or emptying bins, fragments of their conversation kept replaying, especially that line, "Maybe life needs more color." It lingered longer than she wanted to admit. It was late Tuesday night when she saw him again. She was locking up the kitchenette on the 21st floor when hurried footsteps echoed. Turning, she nearly collided with him. Vincent. "Twice in 1 week," she said, trying not to smile. He held up his phone with a sheepish look. "Left this in the boardroom, hoping it's still there." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Second time you've had bad luck on 22. Maybe the building's trying to teach me something." They laughed and stepped into the elevator. Just as the doors closed, the lights flickered and the car jolted to a stop. Karen's breath hitched. Vincent pressed the emergency button and looked at her calmly. "Hey, it's okay, just a glitch." I don't like small spaces," she said, pressing her hand to the wall. "Claustrophobic?" She nodded. "Okay," he said lightly, "then we're not stuck. We're in an exclusive mobile art gallery. VIP only exhibit." She let out a nervous laugh. "Are we the art?" "Not yet. Give me 10 minutes." He stayed still, respectful of her space, and kept talking, asking random questions to distract her. Her favorite pizza, first movie she cried at. Slowly, her breathing evened out. A few minutes later, the elevator whirred back to life. "Impressive," she said. "Most people panic." "I like elevators." "Ha," he said with a shrug. "No one can run away from a conversation." "Sounds like a trap." He grinned. "Only for the interesting ones." They stepped out onto the 22nd floor, and sure enough, his phone was right where he left it. "Thanks for being my elevator buddy," he said. Karen hesitated, then pulled a folded sketch from her back pocket. "Wait, before you go." Vincent took it, unfolding the page. A pencil drawing, simple but haunting. A small boy curled up beside a hospital bed, arms around a sleeping woman. "My little brother," Karen said softly. "After my mom's last surgery, he wouldn't leave her side." Vincent's expression softened. "I used to draw all the time. Got a scholarship, but when Mom got sick, I had to drop out. Took whatever work I could. Cleaning paid the bills." He kept looking at the drawing. "Can I keep this?" Karen blinked. "Sure, it's just a sketch." "No," he said, "it's not." A quiet pause stretched between them, something invisible yet deeply felt. She broke it gently. "What about you? Why are you always here so late?" He smiled, but there was hesitation. "I work in IT, back-end systems." She tilted her head. "What department?" Vincent rubbed the back of his neck. "Wherever they need me." "It shifts." Karen sensed more behind his words but didn't push. "Well," she said, smiling faintly, "for an IT guy, you've got good taste in art." He carefully folded the sketch and slipped it into his pocket. "I know a great artist." She rolled her eyes. "Smooth." As he turned to leave, he glanced back. "See you around, Karen." She stood there long after he was gone, fingers still wrapped around her pencil. Something told her she would. And she hoped she was right. The third time she saw him, Karen was beginning to wonder if fate had its own peculiar work schedule. It was a rainy Thursday night, the kind of night where the city felt muffled and slower than usual. Karen was finishing up dusting the windowsills of the boardroom when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Is this becoming our official meeting spot?" Vincent stood at the door, slightly damp from the rain, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa. She blinked, caught off guard and amused. "What is that?" "Peace offering. I figured it's rude to keep crashing your shift without bringing something." Karen took the warm cup gratefully, wrapping her fingers around it. "You really are committed to these late-night drop-ins, huh?" He leaned against the doorframe, sipping his cocoa like he belonged there. Maybe this floor just has the best lighting in the building. Over the next few weeks, his visits became a quiet rhythm. Some nights he only stayed a few minutes, offering a joke or two. Other nights they sat by the window in comfortable silence, sipping cocoa or talking about everything and nothing. But on a particularly quiet Tuesday, something changed. Karen had stepped out into the hallway to grab supplies when she heard Vincent's voice from the adjacent conference room, the door slightly ajar. She wasn't eavesdropping, not intentionally, but his tone was different, firmer, confident. A kind of authority that didn't fit the IT guy persona he wore so casually. "No, tell them the projections will hold if we shift Q3 focus to digital platforms." Yes, I already signed off. Yes, I'll be in the board meeting Thursday. Just finalize the budget review by morning. She froze. The words, the cadence, the way he spoke, not asking but deciding. When she stepped back into the boardroom a few minutes later, he was seated casually on the edge of the table, sipping from a fresh cup of cocoa as if nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Yeah," he said, smiling. "Just helping out on a side project." Karen didn't push, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, after she returned home, her little brother Nathan was still awake, working on a Lego spaceship at the kitchen table. "You're late," he said without looking up. "Got held up," Karen replied, grabbing a water bottle from the fridge. He glanced up at her with a mischievous grin. "You were with Mop Guy, weren't you?" Karen nearly choked. "He has a name, you know." "Right?" "Vincent." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You talk about him a lot." "I do not." "You really do." She rolled her eyes and sat across from him. "He's just interesting and nice." "Nice looking, too," Nathan said, smirking. Karen gave him a playful nudge. "Go to bed." That conversation echoed in her head the next night, when she and Vincent found themselves watching the rain together again, from the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Do you ever think about what you'd be doing if you weren't here?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, then back out the window. "Every day." Karen turned slightly, curious. "So what would it be? What's your dream, Vincent?" He was quiet for a long time, too long. "I'm not sure," he said at last. Maybe I used to know, but somewhere along the way things changed. And now, I guess I'm just trying to figure it out again." There was something so raw in the way he said it, so honest, that Karen forgot to be disappointed. "Sometimes I think not knowing is worse than failing," she said softly. Vincent turned to her. "And sometimes I think not knowing is just the start of something real." She held his gaze, her heart pulling in a direction she wasn't sure she had the right to follow. "Whatever it is," she said finally, "I hope you find it." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes, and for the first time since they met, the silence between them felt just a little too quiet. That night, after Vincent left, Karen stood alone in the boardroom, watching the lights of the city pulse below. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table absently, mind drifting far from the office. The cool hum of the air conditioning, the rhythmic blinking of a light in the hallway, it all faded into the background. She was 10 again, sitting on the hospital bed beside her mother. The room had smelled of antiseptic and fading lilies. Her mother, frail but radiant in her gentle way, had held her hand with surprising strength. "You have a gift, Karen," she had whispered, brushing a lock of blonde hair from her daughter's forehead. "Your art, it's not just lines and color. You make people feel seen. Keep drawing, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts." Karen had nodded through tears, clutching the sketch pad in her lap. That was the last real conversation they had. Her mother passed away 2 weeks later. For nearly 2 years after, Karen had barely drawn a line. The silence her mother left behind seemed too heavy to color over. Now, years later, standing under artificial lights and beside the ghost of her old dreams, Karen wondered if she had let that silence linger too long. The following evening, as she wheeled her cleaning cart down the hallway, she paused outside the break room. Vincent's voice drifted through the open door, calm but edged with tension. "No, that number's not acceptable," he was saying firmly. "Tell them we need the proposal restructured or the deal is off. I don't care if it's Tokyo or Toronto. They either come back with the right terms or we walk." Karen froze. There was a beat of silence. Then his tone shifted, quieter but no less authoritative. "Yes, I'll review it personally. Send it to my private line." He stepped out a moment later, startled to see her. "Oh, hey," he said, schooling his face into a smile too quickly. "I didn't hear you coming." Karen forced a smile of her own. "Didn't mean to interrupt." There was a pause, long enough for something unspoken to settle between them. She could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. He opened his mouth to say something, but she spoke first. "I can't hang out tonight," she said gently. "Long shift, and I need some time." Vincent blinked. "Is everything okay?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice soft. "You're kind, and I like talking to you, but I think I need to remember who I am when you're not around, just for a bit." He nodded slowly, respectfully. "I understand." Karen stepped past him, her cart rolling ahead, but as she turned the corner she paused and looked back. "I want to believe what we're building is real," she said quietly, "but right now I need to feel like I deserve it." Vincent didn't follow her. He didn't argue. He simply gave her a look, a mix of sadness and admiration, and let her go. And for the first time in their many late-night encounters, Karen walked away alone, unsure if she would ever return to find him still waiting. The days that followed felt heavier than usual. Vincent did not show up on the 22nd floor that week. No casual drop-ins, no warm smiles or quiet banter beside the windows. Karen waited, not actively, but in that subtle way you hope without admitting it to yourself. Every time the elevator chimed, her heart jumped, and every time it was someone else. She pushed herself harder, cleaned faster, longer, anything to keep her hands moving, her mind busy. But in the quiet moments between tasks, his absence echoed louder than any silence ever had. At night, sleep evaded her. She tossed under her thin blanket, replaying old conversations, regretting how she had left things. By Thursday evening, the weight of it had grown unbearable. At home, Karen sat hunched over the small kitchen table, a pencil clutched between her fingers, a blank sheet of paper in front of her. The overhead light flickered slightly, and from the next room her little brother's voice broke the silence. "You're thinking about him again, huh?" She looked up. Nathan stood leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression older than his years. "I'm not," she started, but he cut her off with a small grin. "You draw when you miss something, or someone." Karen stared down at the page. "I haven't drawn in so long, I'm not even sure if I remember how." Nathan stepped forward, pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Then don't draw to remember. Just draw to feel. You always told me art doesn't need a reason." Her chest tightened. It was something she had once told him when he was afraid to color outside the lines. "You're right," she whispered. She picked up the pencil again and let her hand move. Slowly lines formed, his eyes formed, then his smile, the slight crinkle at the corners. His hands, one holding a mop handle, the other holding a cocoa cup. A rolled-up sleeve, a look of quiet understanding. It was Vincent, not in a suit, not in command, but as she had first known him, kneeling beside her on a wet floor, sharing a moment no one else had seen. She finished the sketch in silence, then placed it gently beside the others she had never shown anyone. The next evening she was halfway through restocking the cleaning supplies on the 20th floor when her phone buzzed. She rarely received texts at work, and even more rarely from the main office. It was a message from building reception. "Please report to the executive office on the 30th floor. CEO Vincent Holloway has requested to speak with you." Karen stared at the screen, her breath catching. Vincent. Her heart hammered in her chest. The words blurred as a dozen thoughts rushed in at once. He was the CEO? Her Vincent? She read the message again, blinking hard. She thought of his voice on the phone, the way he had sidestepped her questions, the authority in his words, the silence when she asked who he really was. "Vincent Holloway," she whispered aloud, and suddenly it all made sense. The hints, the distance, the restraint. She stood frozen for a moment, unsure if she should run toward the truth or away from it. Then she looked down at her hands, the same hands that had drawn him just the night before. They were shaking, but they were steady enough to press the elevator button. The elevator glided upward in silence, each floor number lighting up with soft finality. Karen's reflection stared back at her in the polished steel walls, wide eyes, pale lips, the faintest tremble in her jaw. Her heart pounded louder than the hum of the machinery. She had never stepped foot on the 30th floor before. She had never needed to. When the doors slid open, she was greeted by a reception area unlike anything below: glass, steel, and silence. A sleek assistant with a Bluetooth earpiece rose and gestured gently toward a set of double doors. "He's waiting for you." Karen stepped forward slowly, her worn sneakers quiet against the marble floor. She pushed open the doors and stopped cold. Vincent was seated behind a long, dark wood desk, bathed in the golden light of the city skyline behind him. He wore a charcoal suit that fit too perfectly to be borrowed. A silver tie clip glinted under the recessed lights. He looked every bit the man in control, the man with power. Except for his eyes. They met hers instantly, uncertain, hopeful, maybe even afraid. Karen didn't move, she just stared. The air between them seemed to stretch, thick with questions she had no idea how to voice. "Karen," he said softly, rising to his feet. She swallowed hard. Was any of it real? His shoulders fell, and he stepped out from behind the desk. Every single second, she shook her head, backing away half a step. "You lied." "I hid," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." She laughed, a bitter, breathless sound. "That's semantics, Vincent." He paused. "You're right." Silence filled the room. The city lights blinked behind him, indifferent. "I didn't want you to see the suit before the soul," he said quietly, "because the moment people find out who I am, what I am, they change. Their words, their tone, their eyes. But you talked to me like a person. You laughed with me. You told me about your family. You looked me in the eye and didn't ask for anything." Karen looked away, blinking back the sting. "I should have told you sooner," he continued. "But every night I told myself, just one more evening like this, one more time as me, not the man with a title. I was selfish." She finally looked at him again. "You were lonely." He nodded, terribly. She stepped closer, slowly, as if her legs were deciding without her consent. "When I asked you what your dream was," she said, voice tight, "you said you didn't know." "I lied then," he admitted. "Or maybe I just didn't know how to say it. My dream was to be seen, truly seen, not as a name on a door, not as a number on a magazine list, just as someone trying to be good, trying to be enough." Karen's throat tightened. "I never meant to hurt you," he whispered. "I just didn't know how to be both versions of myself at once." Her vision blurred, tears welling up faster than she could stop them. Vincent stepped forward, cautiously. "Please don't cry." She let out a shaky breath. "You don't get to tell me how to feel, Mr. CEO." A soft smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fair." She wiped her cheeks, frustrated. "I don't even know what this is." "You." "Me?" "Any of it." "I know," he said. "You have every right to walk away." Karen stared at the floor, then back up at him. "But I won't." His eyes flickered. "I won't walk away," she said again, stronger this time. "But I also can't just forget. You kept this from me. I need time, Vincent, to think, to feel like I'm standing on solid ground again." "I'll wait," he said immediately. "As long as you need." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she walked past him, toward the wide windows behind his desk. The city stretched out before her in a wash of light and motion. "You have a beautiful view," she murmured. Vincent joined her at a respectful distance. "I never really noticed it until I started watching it through your eyes." She turned to him, softer now. "You're very good with words. I had good inspiration." Karen smiled faintly, wiped away one last tear, and reached for the elevator button. "I'm not saying goodbye," she said. "I know." The doors opened behind her and she stepped inside, looking at him once more. "I'll let you know when I'm ready," she said. He nodded, hands in his pockets, looking more like the man who once helped her mop a floor than the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm. As the doors closed, neither of them moved. But something had shifted. Something had begun again. Karen did not return to work the next night or the night after that. She did not give notice. She did not answer her supervisor's texts. She needed space. Space to feel, to breathe, to think without the weight of fluorescent lights or freshly mopped floors. She spent most of those days at home, curled up on the old beige sofa, with a blanket draped around her shoulders like armor. Vincent did not call. He did not text. Not a word. At first, the silence was maddening. Then, slowly, it became grounding. For the first time in months, maybe years, Karen sat with herself, really sat, and tried to understand the whirlwind of emotions tearing through her. She pulled out her sketchbook. She began to draw again, not for anyone else, but for herself. Lines turned into shadows, shadows into faces, faces into moments. Vincent's smile, Nathan's laugh, her mother's eyes. Every emotion had a stroke, every memory a curve, and with each pencil movement she felt her hands become steadier. On the fourth day she came home to find Nathan already there, bouncing excitedly by the kitchen counter. "Someone dropped this off for you," he said, holding out a black envelope. Karen took it slowly, her name printed in gold across the front, in elegant handwriting. She opened it carefully. Inside was a formal invitation on thick ivory cardstock. "You are cordially invited to the opening night of Karen's Nights, a private art exhibition. Friday, 7:00 p.m. Pierce and Holloway Gallery, Midtown Manhattan." Beneath the printed words was a handwritten note. "Karen, 2 months ago you left a sketch in my hands. I knew then what the world deserved to see. I submitted your work to the board for our annual Emerging Artist Showcase without your name. They chose your pieces purely on emotion, on truth, on the way your lines speak louder than words. Now your name is finally where it belongs, on the walls, in the light. You gave me a version of the world I never knew I needed. Now let me give a piece of it back to you." Vincent Karen sat down slowly, the invitation trembling in her fingers. She read it twice, then a third time. The tears came softly, silently. Not from sadness, but from something deeper, a release she hadn't realized she needed. She pressed the invitation to her chest and closed her eyes. He had believed in her even when she had forgotten how. She remembered the way he had looked at her drawings, the way he had said, "It's not just a sketch," the way he had waited, not just in silence, but in trust. Karen rose from the chair and walked to her bedroom. She opened the closet and pulled out the one black dress she had kept from college, a simple thing she had once worn to her first gallery tour. She laid it on the bed and stared at it for a long moment. A soft knock came at the door. Nathan peeked in. "You okay?" Karen nodded, smiling through damp lashes. "Yeah, I think I am." He spotted the invitation in her hand. "So, you going?" She looked down at it once more, then back at him. "I have to," she whispered, and in her heart she knew. This was not just about seeing Vincent again. This was about seeing herself. The gallery glowed with soft amber light, each painting bathed in its own gentle spotlight. Laughter and conversation drifted through the room, mingling with the quiet hum of a jazz quartet playing in the far corner. Waiters in black ties moved gracefully between guests, balancing glasses of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres, but Karen barely noticed any of it. She stood near the entrance, her fingers clutching the strap of her simple black purse, her eyes fixed on the far wall, where a small crowd had gathered. Her name, Karen Whitmore, was printed in elegant lettering beneath the exhibit title, Karen's Nights. She took a breath and stepped inside. The paintings were exactly as she had left them, sketched, refined, colored with fragments of her soul. There were images of night janitors wiping glass in silence, a child curled asleep beside a lunchbox, under fluorescent lights, and a woman staring out of a 22nd floor window into the city night. People were leaning in, pointing gently, murmuring to each other with soft reverence. One woman wiped at her eyes and turned to whisper something to her husband. Another man simply stared, unmoving, at a pencil sketch of two hands mopping the same puddle. Karen's steps slowed as she approached that one. She had named it quietly, without telling anyone, the mop that started it all. "It's beautiful," a voice said behind her. She turned. There he was. Vincent stood a few steps away, no suit, no tie, just a white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His eyes were soft, the same gentle light in them she had seen the night of the spill. "I almost didn't recognize you without your tie," she said, a smile playing at the edge of her lips. "I figured tonight wasn't about the CEO," he replied. "Tonight's about you." They stood quietly for a moment. The air between them was warm, expectant, forgiving. Then he held out a hand. "May I walk beside the artist tonight?" Karen didn't answer with words. She slipped her hand into his. They moved through the gallery side by side, pausing at each canvas. Guests smiled at them, some stepping aside, sensing something unspoken and sacred. When they reached the far end of the gallery, where a final sketch hung alone, Vincent stopped. The drawing was simple. A woman with a mop in one hand and a pencil in the other, standing in front of a blank canvas. No background, no framing, just potential. "I always knew you'd come back to this," Vincent said, his voice barely above a whisper. Karen looked at him, her eyes shining. "I think I just needed someone to remind me who I was." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the first sketch she had ever given him. Nathan and their mother in that tiny hospital room, drawn from memory and pain. "I've carried this every day since you gave it to me," he said. "And every day, I've thought about the woman who sees the world this clearly." She looked at him, her heart full. "Why me, Vincent? Out of everyone?" He took a slow breath. "Because you never wanted anything from me, except the truth. And I realized that's what I've always wanted too. Not the title, not the power." He touched the glass of the final sketch. "My dream is to finally live honestly, with you." Karen felt her breath catch. This wasn't the man behind a desk. This was the man who had knelt beside her on the floor and said nothing when she cried. This was the man who saw the art in her long before she believed it was still there. "I'm going back to school," she said quietly. "There's a program, weekend classes." "I'm going to apply." Vincent smiled, his thumb brushing hers. "Good. The world needs more of what you see." She turned to the crowd, then back to the man beside her. And in that moment, beneath the soft lights, surrounded by pieces of her past and possibilities of her future, Karen understood something simple and true. Love needs no titles, no status, no fancy doors or designer suits. It only needs two people willing to meet each other in the mess. Together, they stood before the mop that started it all, hand in hand, heart to heart, ready to begin whatever came next. And so, what began as a simple moment, a spilled bucket, a helping hand, became the start of something far more powerful. A love built not on titles or appearances, but on truth, compassion, and the courage to see each other fully. In the quiet spaces of the night, between mopped floors and midnight cocoa, two people found the kind of connection that could never be bought, only felt. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories come from the most ordinary places. If this story touched your heart, and you believe in love that grows in the most unexpected ways, be sure to subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales that stir the soul, heal the heart, and remind us that love, real love, is always worth the wait. Until next time, keep believing in the magic of quiet moments.